CardGamesTV1 Podcast. So, the new train of thought that I have for the Dragon Ball Super card game, I've always pointed out the fact that the first 4 damage is the easiest because your opponent, pretty much just lets you deal them that damage. And the first 2 turns, it's hard for your opponent to defend. They could, but they'll just be wasting resources doing so. And that could be problematic, so most people don't. They just take the hits in the first 2 turns. So if you can do 4 damage the first 2 turns, that's great. Then after that, turn 3, turn 4, and so on. You want to keep your defenses up. So play defensively, because there's really no need to rush to get them down to 2 life. I mean, I'm so used to that. I've been doing that for 4 years now, rushing people down to 2 life or 1 life. But because that's part of my win. My strategy is to get them down to 2 or 1 life and then burn them for game, right? Or finish them off with a double strike. But the way things are getting, and especially with a lot of the free negates and stuff like that, you want to play things a little differently. So I'm definitely trying to put more hand destruction into a lot of my decks, which is why I'm leaning towards the color green. And it's always funny that I see online people talking trash about green, saying green ain't good, green needs more stuff. It's like, no, green is great. Green has more than it needs. Green literally has hand destruction. That's the main thing that green does. And ironically, that is the best effect, the best thing to have when you're playing this game. Because, as I mentioned before, the first 4 damage is the easiest. The next 2 requires a little bit of effort. The last 2 is the hardest. But what makes the last 4 damage, right, hard to do is that your opponent will defend. Your opponent will out-combo, they'll try to out-combo attacks, right? They'll try to save their super combos for late game. They'll try to save their negates and blockers, right, for late game. So that's why the last 4 damage is harder to do. You also have to take into account your opponent's leader will be awakened. Your opponent might have unisons, and maybe the leader might have an effect that protects them. They might have cards that make it hard for you to attack the leader, like the Deadly Defenders, for example. And I noticed they've been making more and more Deadly Defender-like cards, which obviously I'm a fan of. But anything that helps protect the leader is great. And they've been definitely trying to put more blockers. Unison blockers are really busted, especially unison blockers that can gain markers through their own effects. Busted level blockers, because they will literally help you block your leader so that you can just focus on other things you do. So that's pretty busted right there. So being able to fight behind a castle, the whole castle concept, defend the castle. So you can put up a castle, a unison blocker like Raditz Giant Force, and then sit behind Raditz, right? Sit behind that wall, blocking your leader while you throw attacks at your opponent, every turn, but keep your defenses up, by keeping your energy up, so you can make some plays. If you notice, yellow has some cards that like to tap energy. So that's why the ability to keep as much energy up as possible is, useful, because if they start trying to tap down your energy, that's going to reduce your chances of being able to play some of your defensive cards, some of your negates, right? And make it hard for you to do rival plays, right? So you want to keep an eye on that. Another thing is you want to have things that can attack more than once. Dual attacking is a very powerful, a very important keyword skill in this year. So in the year 2022, I've been promoting the idea of gotta look for double dual attack, triple attack. Look for those types of effects and make use of them, because they will help you bypass negates and blockers and stuff like that, especially blocker negates. Or if you end up in a scenario where your opponent has a unison that's a blocker, you want to try to get past that blocker, right? If your opponent is playing Bulma, you want to be able to get past their little blocker battle cards, right? If you're playing against Hatchiyak, you want the ability to attack more than once because Hatchiyak is already going to restrict your attacks. And you get the idea. The list goes on and on of why you should have battle cards that attack more than once. Unisons that attack more than once, and legions that attack more than once. So the more attacks you can get, the better. So that's what I try to focus on the most. You also want 25k and above attackers. 20k is useful, but 25k and 30k and above are definitely numbers you want to go with, because most people don't even try to out combo 30ks. So obviously that's what made Dark Broly so successful as an archetype, because it's hard for your opponent to out combo 30k. So they just either negated it, blocked it, or just took the hit, right? So there's that. You definitely want to make sure you have your board wipes, because when you're trying to go for game, or trying to clear trying to deal damage to your opponent, you want to make it hard for them to attack you back, especially if you don't have much defense. You definitely want a board wipe. You want to play something that clears your opponent's board and lets you attack. So you can try to deal damage that turn, but reduce the possibility of the clapback. So definitely need to master the art of anti-clapback. So look for any floodgate negates, deadly defenders, things like that. Look into those types of cards, keep you in the game longer. But back to the whole damage thing, right? Dealing 4 damage, is easy. So once you deal 4 damage, it's all a matter of setting your opponent up to take the last 4 damage in a single turn. You definitely want a lot of double strikes, and like I said, dual attacks, anything that can attack more than once is very important, but also anything that could do more than 1 damage is very important as well. So making sure everything has double strike, that way you can, because remember, you only need 2 attacks to go through that are double strike in order to finish your opponent off, right? To deal the last 4 damage. So deal 4 damage, which is not hard. You could do 4 damage just with your leader alone, and then with your unisons and battle cards, you just try to go for the last 4 damage, and that largely be double strikes. That's helping you do that, or 1 triple strike and double strike. You get it. You get the idea. What else? Anything that can help you deal 4 damage, like burn your opponent for 4. There's like 2 to 3 cards in the game that can pretty much burn your opponent for 4, or at least make the last 4 of their life disappear, right? So looking into that obviously will be important, making that stuff work, and that will help you with your, the consistency of winning. And that's always the goal, is to find ways to deal your opponent 8 damage so you can win, right? As a competitive player, or as just a player in general. But if you're a competitive player, you definitely are always looking for the next way, the new way to win out the game. I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the point where you just want to do the first 2 damage, right? And you'll probably try to do that turn 1, turn 2, and then the rest of the game you just focus on setting your opponent up just to deal them 6 damage all in 1 turn. You know what I mean? Like, that could be the game plan. Or you deal them no damage, you wait until late game, right? And then deal all 8 damage all at once. That'd be that next level shit right there, right? Where all you did was just stall long enough to get to the point where you can deal them 8 damage all in 1 turn. So that'd be pretty badass to see people do that. I definitely not claiming I can do that. That's not really my style. For me, it's the reverse. I would like to get to that point where I can just not do no damage until turn, I'll say 5, like 5 and 6, and then do all 8 damage all in 1 turn. Stuff like that. It'd be cool to obviously win out the game with stuff like Victory Strike, with a Victory Strike keyword. So that'd be kind of cool. So we'll see if that plays out. It'd be funny if they make it a unison that has the keyword Victory Strikes, or gains the keyword Victory Strikes. That'd be kind of cool, right? But I don't want it to be an ultimate, because it's like, it just defeats the purpose. It's just, I need 4 copies of this win con, right? This Victory Strike, right? That way it increases the consistency of you trying to win the game with the effect, right? With the keyword. So there's that. But I'm definitely looking for ways to easily get double strike in. That's why I always say the first 4 is the easiest, because I could do 4 damage just with my leader alone in the first 4 turns of the game. I mean, well, yeah, within the first 2 to 4 turns, I should say 2 to 4. First 2 to 4 turns of the game, and if I can drag out the game longer than that, being able to deal the last 4, it's possible. Harder, that's the whole point I've been making. It gets harder to do the last damage late game. But if you can, set it up and have a strategy to end them out, you're good. Like, for example, I just started, trying to utilize that concept, and I made a deck, set 2 Zamasu deck, where the idea is for me to use Turning the Tide, which will give me the hand destruction effect, along with Mirror Creator Absorb, which just will give me a cheap body on board, which will be really strong. So it will kind of guarantee me an extra, guarantee me enough my attack to go through. Basically, just why not, right? By itself, it can win me games. If my opponent is down to 1 life and they have a big hand, I could just drop that attack. And as long as they don't have negates and stuff, I should be able to win just with that alone. So by itself, it's a win con. But combine it with Angel 17 and Turning the Tide just adds to it, because of the fact that I could play it. Obviously, there's other options I could play. Obviously, I could play Awakened Warrior Bardic instead with that strategy, where I play Awakened Warrior Bardic first, because I could play it for free. I just need 4 more cards in my drop, playing for free, so it's a 20k double strike, so that's 2 damage right there. Then play Angel 17 Turning Tide, rip my whole opponent's hand away. So now my opponent would be defenseless, hand-wise. Make sure that their board is clear of any blockers, right? Or anything they could try to combo out with. And then, go in with the crit, the Android 17 first. Then go in with the double strike. Right there, that's 3 easy damage right there. And then, try to finish the game off with your leader, so that'd be 4 damage right there with just those 2 cards alone. So that's the kind of stuff, I definitely try to look into. Another possibility would be if I'm right, there was a 30k double strike mirror that you could consider. But I think it has a cost. But I have to double check it. But if it's cheap enough, then it has potential. I think that's the one that costs 2, which means I would need 9 energy to pull that off. But to do the Mirror Creator Absorb thing with Android 17 Turning Tides, you would need 8 energy. But just to do the Bardic Awakened Warrior Bardic with Android 17 Turning Tides, you would just need 7 energy. And of course, you could always try to ramp up into that. That's the other thing. I definitely want to incorporate that, upgrade the deck, and add Mudge in the Fire E Supreme. Mudge in the Fire. No, it's not E Supreme. Mudge in the Fire Supreme card. One of the 2-drop that lets you tap it for energy in the battle area. Try to add her. That way, on turn 6, I could try to go for game. So that way, turn 6, I can pace. I can overall, Bardic, and then drop Android 17 Turning Tide on turn 6, and then boom, go off. What I could do to try to do it sooner, try to do it by turn 5, I think. Try to do the strategy by turn 5. Yeah, I definitely want to give that a try. Is use the leader. Yeah, I'm gonna put those ideas into Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta leader, because he has the ability to ramp. You know what? There's actually something else, another leader I could use, which would be a little bit faster to pull that off, which would be Super Saiyan 3 Goku. And I do, have a Super Saiyan 3 Goku deck, so I might want to add the strategy into that deck. Well, I'll see what I can do. I'll make a couple of decks. So I'll do Super Saiyan 3 4 and Super Saiyan 3 using that, strategy, Android 17, turning the tides with, Waking Warrior Bardock. He's not a bad option because of the fact that he is double strike, so he does 2 damage along with, your leader plus Android 17. Because typically you try to get your opponent life down to 2, so that way you can use your leader and Android 17 to go for game. Another thing you could do to try to deal more damage is have a unison already in play that has dual attack. So a blue unison with dual attack for, with 20k body is always good, right? And then of course your leader, of course, while it's awakened, and then do the overall and then drop the Android 17 turning tides. That right there would, let's say what has overwhelm has double strike, then you have 3, 4, 5, 6 potential damage. So the fact you could just do 2 damage to your opponent and then drop that whole entire strategy where you have the dual attack unison along with 17 turning tides that hopefully you could drop sooner than later, and then drop the double strike unison. I mean, not unison, overwhelm. Right there, 6 damage. You can just try to go for game right there and then. Even if you don't manage to deal all 6 damage to your opponent, I mean, you're already in a much better position than they are, because next turn you'll just try to go for game anyway, because you'll still have the dual attack unison, the leader of course, and you'll still have Android 17 turning the tide. The overall battle card obviously will leave at the end of turn, will be warped, but at least you were able to do everything else. So that is definitely something that I'm looking into. Definitely try to incorporate that idea. That's not the only thing. It's just that 17 turn tide is just really good card, right? So that's why I'm using it as an example. But other things you want to do is do some damage, at least 4 damage or more, and then you want to set it up where you drastically reduce your opponent's hand size as much as possible, or completely make it disappear, and then go for game. That's the new thing I'm doing right now, because typically I try to burn for game, but now doing the whole hand destruction and then go for game strategy is the new thing that I'm working with. I mean, I've done it a couple times before. A lot of times I would just play in an aggressive way that my opponent would have to combo to try to survive my attacks, that inherently I got to the point where their hand size was so low that it was easy for me to go for game. But that's because I'm forcing them to do that, forcing them to reduce their hand size, which made it easier for me to go for game. But to deliberately reduce their hand size so I can go for game is the thing that I typically didn't do. Typically, my opponent will have like 30 cards in their hands. I'll have like 4 cards in my hands, and I'm playing to go for game while they have that big of a hand size. A lot of the times, obviously, my attacks go through and I win. Even though they have a big hand size, I still win. But can't rely on that. On that luck, right? Can't rely on my opponent not being able to stop me from going for game. So you want to reduce your opponent's hand size to reduce the possibility of them using negates. Reduce the possibility of using the negates, and reduce the possibility. Negates and reduce the possibility of them out comboing attacks. So those are the 2 things you really got to focus on when it comes to your opponent's hand, is negates and combo power. So you definitely want to keep their hands under 6 cards. The less, the better. If they have 3 cards in their hands, that's always good. You definitely want to go for game when they're down to that many cards. If they're playing blue, obviously, baby Hatchiak would be a problem. But most other decks, you don't have to worry about not being able to go for game in those types of situations. But I'm definitely trying to incorporate more hand destruction. So that's what I'm looking for in the new sets for every color. So right now, because I entered 17 turning tide, blue has hand destruction with Android 17 turning tide, which is why I'm doing stuff with it. But I would like to use other things to pull off that strategy. I don't want to rely on that specific card specifically. I don't want to rely on that card too much. I'm a fan, don't get me wrong, and of course I own the card, But it's too easy. It's too good because it's up there with the 7-drop Gogeta. You know, that card got banned for a reason because it was just that good. But then we have Android 17 turns high, which to me is pretty much the same thing. But okay. The other thing is worth banning, but this card ain't. Not saying I want 17 banned. I'm just saying I like 17. He's a good card. I think part of the issue with the Gogeta was that you could cheat him out sooner. I think that's what it was. Is that you could play him on turn 5. So when 17 hits the field, it's usually turn 7. I can, of course, turbo out into it. I could ramp into it, of course. And that's the idea, is play ramp leaders like Super Saiyan 3 Goku and Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. Use them to ramp, along with Majin the Fire, Supreme Kai, and then drop it like at least turn 5. Drop the Android 17, turn the tides, and then just go in on my opponent. So it's just a matter of setting things up. Because if I could set up a dual attacker prior to dropping the Overwhelm, and that will give me 5 plus the lead, that would give me 6 potential damage. So 6 potential damage on like turn 5. Not bad, especially with the fact that my opponent probably will only have 6 life or less, and that's the goal. But ideally, you don't want to, just because you can deal potentially 6 damage, don't be in a situation where you have to deal 6 damage to win. You want to be in a scenario where you have to deal 4 or 2 damage, and you do this type of combo. So that's the whole point. You always want to get your opponent down to into a situation where just 1 or 2 attacks getting through their defenses is enough to win you the game. Because that's all it really is. Because think about it logically. The reason I said the first 4 damage is the easiest is because your opponent really puts no effort to try to stop you dealing the first 4 damage. They usually just let you hit them for 4 damage, right? Or they just can't stop you, so you deal the 4 damage anyway, right? Whether they choose to let you deal them 4 damage or they can't stop you is why you can do it. But after that, they'll put effort to try to stop you. After that, they'll have the energy, because after turn 2, they're going to start having enough energy. They can start playing a lot of negates. Right, they could play Mecha Frieza Repose, right? They could play Gohan, Baby's Minion. The new card I like to play with, that I was playing with recently, of course, for just 2 energy, Topo, and for 2 energy, obviously, Oceanus, right? Shenron. Those are really good cards. But the new 3-drop that I like to play with when there's against my opponent is the Goku Miraculous Transformation, because he's a good card, and he negates an attack, and he's a deadly defender, and he's a 6-drop body on board, so he's good for as an evolved target for Ultra Instinct Goku, Ultra Instinct Sign Goku, or anything, any other Goku that you want to evolve on top of them that might have a really, really cool effect to win you out the game. So I'm definitely going to be experimenting with some of that because I've been wanting a Goku that I can easily play out for cheap, that I can evolve a lot of these old Gokus on. So that's something I'm looking into, is trying to get some of these old cards playable, because some of the old cards are really strong. It's just that they were hard to play because they were definitely hard to play because Objection got banned. They were easier to play when Objection was in the game, but they took Objection out. They gave us some ramp leaders. Yeah, that's nice and all, but it takes time. It takes effects. You gotta. It takes time, but you also gotta set up the effects, so it wasn't as reliable. Objection definitely just made things easier, especially if you used it in a Mecha Frieza deck. It definitely made things easier and faster, but it's understandable. Objection for Dragon Ball Super is like Black Lotus for Magic, or any of the Lotuses, any of the 0 costing artifacts to give you mana. objection pretty much was our Black Lotus. Fair enough that we can't be having that type of power. But man, I definitely abused the shit out of it. There's a lot of battle cards I played because of that card. But once that card was banned, I couldn't play those cards no more. So obviously I stopped using them. And I just focused on many other things. A lot of low cost battle cards. But as I was saying, you want to focus on getting on at least dealing 4 damage, which, like I said, is the easiest. Dealing 4 damage, and then just try to finish a opponent off in one turn, instead of trying to, pick at their life. If you're using anything other than red, if you're playing a red deck like I typically do, I tend to do 6 to 7 damage in the first 2 turns anyway with the deck. So it's more about just after the first 2 turns, just keep my defenses up so that way I can just finish the game off through burn. Or since that's what I'm doing more now, I'm using Mirror Creator Absorb more. Use that along with like Champa or something, and just do the Mirror Champa as my win con, because it's very reliable. It meets the criteria that I need, because typically I make sure my opponent doesn't have blockers. I typically try to either make them use up their negates, so that way they don't have negates, or they're tapped out and whatnot, and it'd be hard for them to play a lot of negates. So, and then just drop the mirror, right, and finish them off that way. And all I need is 2 energies just to pull that off. And mirror will just inherently have a strong attack, so I don't have to have a big hand size to get his attack to go through, and then just double strike my opponent for game. So that's the thing I'm doing more now. So pay attention. You'll see that in my deck profiles. I'm doing more of that now. But yeah, trying to deal a lot of damage in one turn late game is definitely the new thing to try to do. Or at least try to come up with a really good, simple strategy to do a lot of damage late game, as opposed to trying to do, 2 damage while your opponent, obviously has a big defensive hand. But usually the reason their hand's very big is because you're dealing them damage that isn't crit. Always try to deal crit damage, obviously. And they draw for their leader's effect or any other effect. So that's why hand destruction is something I want to lean towards. Green is obviously the automatic color for that. It automatically gives you that. So if you can play blue-green, red-green, yellow-green, pretty much any, as long as you can splash in green, you have, the ability to try to incorporate hand destruction and try to make sure you get that in there. Try to play leaders that have green in there, that's multicolor, like a multicolor leader that's green, red, green, blue, green, yellow, that kind of stuff. Or just a leader that just have the ability to count as being green. So that kind of stuff. Because a lot of times you don't, but the main thing I'm saying is like try to focus on some green leaders, so that you can try to use rebrand, try to make sure you have some green energy to play a rebrand, for example. What's her name? Rosie, the 3-drop Rosie, she's pretty good. She can knock out 2 cards from your opponent's hand and give you 3 attacks. So like I said, anything that can give you 2 to 3 attacks off of 1 card is awesome. And then of course some overwhelm, and then mix all that up together and create some decks. And that's another thing, the idea of generic. I remember somebody was not complaining, but they were discussing to me, pointing out the idea that well, they were trying to say they're like generic is bad, but generic is good, because generic is what allows diversity, allows you to be creative, allows you to do something different than doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. Everybody's playing archetypes. Everybody sees the new set. Everybody's already thinking of which leader and which theme deck they're going to play. So some people are leaning towards the GT deck. Some people are looking at TOA, even though they don't like what they see so far. Some people are considering trying it out. But the funny thing is, instead of looking for some generic cards within those colors, within those archetypes to improve decks they already have, improve their black deck, improve their red deck, improve their blue deck. They're too busy just thinking about just scrapping all the decks they already have, right, and just focusing on playing these new archetypes, which is the most common thing that people have been doing since the beginning of the game, was playing archetypes and not really playing generic cards. I'm always about generic stuff because it allows me to create whatever I want, and what I make is always going to be better than whatever the company that creates the game can create. So these archetypes are nice, as in they're cute because they're trying to be thematic and whatnot, and it's nice that they at least exist for people who like that type of stuff and want something simple, a core, like something they can I just get these cards and that automatically builds a deck, it builds a strategy, and then they just build on it. I'm not against that if you're actually going to build on top of the archetype and improve it and make something better than what the archetype normally does. I like the idea of the GT cards being used with Boma. I tried that already, and then now I got an upgraded version of the deck, so I'm going to try out the Unison, the Space Unison, and try it out in Boma and see how that works out. It should work out pretty good, obviously, and it just be something fun, something different, just for fun. I prefer Boma Burn, but I want to give this GT thing a try, just for fun. If anything, it's just be more for fun than anything. It's not like it'll be a competitive deck for me. I'll still prefer to use Boma Burn as my competitive deck, or my choice of Boma deck for competitive play. What else? But don't want to get into the whole archetype versus generic debate, right? But it's the fact that generic is really good. It lets you, especially if you're a deck builder, you want generic, because if this game didn't have generic cards and it was only archetypes, and so it's just down to me choosing decks and playing them, I wouldn't play the game. Because the funny thing is, there's a game out there that it is like that. It's Keyforge. That's the name of the game. Keyforge. You buy a starter deck, and then you're supposed to play the starter deck as is. You don't build it or anything. You just buy it, open it, sleeve it, shuffle it, and start playing the game. And that's how that game system works. Is that you're supposed to buy pre-built decks and then just play. And it's like, what? I get that that's 90% of card game communities. That's what they do. They just buy pre-made stuff. They net deck and whatnot. And then the idea of this strategy was to prevent net decking, because every time you buy a deck, it's not guaranteed to have the same ratio of cards. It's not guaranteed to be the exact same as anybody else's. So even if two people bought the same box, starter deck, structure deck, whatever they call it, there's no guarantee that they'll have the exact same cards, so the decks will function differently. And so then it's more down to skill, less of what the deck does. So it's more random that way. So it's like booster packs, but in a deck format. So you get this big box, right? This structure deck. You open it, and everything in there is pretty much random. I mean, they all work, of course. They all work within the deck's design. It's just that they're a little random of what cards will appear in there, and so it's almost like open up a booster pack and then just playing with whatever's in the booster pack. Is what I'm trying to say. So it's like that's cute. That's something I would do for like draft or something. Like the idea of just like, oh yeah, for fun, let's just buy these decks and play them as is. So I'm all for like pre-con decks and starter decks and stuff like that. Like just for fun, just be like, hey, let's buy some pizza and buy some structure decks and just play them. Let's not worry about being competitive or all this extra stuff, and just play for fun. That I'm not against. I'm cool for that. But when it comes to like playing competitively and actually being good at the game, I'd rather build my own shit. And that'd be the end of the podcast.